Masculinity, the podcast where we, or the space where we question the outdated rules of what it means to be a man and rewrite the narrative with purpose, presence, and power. Now, let me ask you something, especially to all the men who are listening to this conversation. What if growing older didn't mean slowing down, but getting sharper, stronger, and more alive? Sounds interesting, right? Well, today we are diving into a topic most men don't talk about: male longevity and health span. And not just how long we live, but how well. Vitality, clarity, energy, sex drive, strength, these aren't just gym goals or biohacks. They are lifelines to being present in our careers, relationships, and even sense of self. And joining me is someone who has helped some of the world's most elite performers, from Grand Slam champions to Fortune 50 executives, optimize their energy, health, and mindset. He's not just studied peak performance, listeners, he has coached it, lived it, and built world class programs at places like Canyon Ranch, Gatorade, and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and beyond. So, if you have ever wondered what it really takes to live younger, stronger, longer without falling for hype or hustle, this conversation is for you. And listeners, meet my guest, Mark Kovacs. Mark, welcome to the show. And I'm really, really honored and pumped up for our conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward. This is a topic, obviously, I spend my entire life in, so I'm excited to chat about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mark, before we talk about the topic, I would love to explore your journey. I guess our listeners would love to know, I mean, how exactly all this started. I mean, how exactly the discussion or the concept around the vitality and clarity around masculinity gained importance for you.
Yeah, no, obviously, males have a lot of stresses in their life and they have to address their financial well-being, their emotional well-being, their physical well-being, their mental well-being, and all of these are in synergy. If one of these areas is off, it affects the entire life. So I spend a lot of time on helping some of the top individuals in the world in sports and in business find ways to integrate these areas and to optimize their life.
That's interesting, Mark. Very interesting. And you have spent decades helping high performers stay at their peak. So, from your experience, Mark, what are the non negotiables men must focus on to boost health span and vitality?
So the good thing is we have so much data now over the last 50 years and even longer, actually. A lot of this work started in the early 1920s, actually. It was designed for workers that were working in coal mines, in factories, and things like that. How do we optimize a full worker's day? And mostly for productivity purposes. It wasn't necessarily for health purposes. But some of the same testing that was done back then, for example, a VO2 test, so the amount of oxygen you can consume per breath, is a test that was developed back then. And we've been using that test in athletes for over 100 years now. But over the last, say, decade or so, it's become very, very popular in a major marker of someone's longevity and their potential health span. So it's important to make sure that aerobic capacity and the ability to take in and utilize oxygen is one of the most vital things anyone can do, because without oxygen, all our systems don't function well. So that's obviously right at the top of the list. Secondarily, we've seen a huge better understanding of the importance of resistance training. Weight training in different formats provides such a value to everyone, male and female. But from a standpoint of having strong muscles, that actually reduces a lot of the physical declines that happen with age. It improves balance, it improves stability, it improves the ability to catch yourself if you do fall, and don't have a significant injury, for example, a hip fracture or something like that as someone ages. So all of these things help individuals live longer for stronger. And that's really important because those two factors, if that's all you could do, is improve your volume of oxygen, your VO2, and your strength and muscle. Those are the big two drivers that really take into account a lot of factors. The other areas, when it comes to non-physical specific areas, is connection. We know that individuals that have strong family connections and social structures live longer. So we want to make sure that that's a huge part of your existence. Yeah. So that's really, really, really good. It's really important to make sure that we really improve that social connection and giving someone people around them that are positive, that help them, that they feel like they can rely on. And then the last big one is a life of purpose, because we know that individuals that have a purpose, a big purpose, it could be family, it could be business purpose, it could be spiritual purpose. Uh, those are really, really important to make sure that people have a life worth living. They enjoy every day, even the hard days. They understand that you can't have great days if you don't have bad days. And so you need to have that long-term purpose that will provide the skill set and the desire and the enjoyment that allows you to deal with adversity, create greater resiliency, and be able to handle setbacks that we know life throws at us.
Wow. Those are some of the really important points, and especially, I mean, of course, from a feminine perspective, I think the last 2 points which you mentioned, number one is, having people around you, your family, your friends, or maybe a community. I think it's so relevant right now in today's context because loneliness is now becoming a silent killer. It's like a slow poison. And secondly, having a sense of, a life purpose, that is so, so important. And especially we see in older men that um, you get judged for your past mistakes, or you feel or you think that, okay, now I am not maybe a provider or a caregiver, so I don't have any purpose now with me. So that kind of eats you from within. And this I have specially observed in many of the older men and women. So I absolutely connect with all the points you mentioned, but specifically with the last two.
Yeah, it's most important, and everyone's working on different aspects of their life. And if you have certain areas that are dropping below where they should be, it impacts all the other areas. And like you said, everyone needs to feel a sense of purpose, have a ability to learn, earn, and leave a legacy. Those three things are really the cycle of life when it comes to a lot of people. You have to learn constantly. You have to earn just to put a roof over your head and feed your family. And then you want to leave a legacy, which is truly the purpose. It could be legacy for family. It could be a business that someone started and it impacted hundreds of thousands or millions of people. It could just be you want to leave people around you feeling better from meeting you. So all of this ties into that really important concept of, do you really have a purpose? Do you understand it? And do you live it every day?
That is so true. So true, Mark. Okay, now let's talk about the misconceptions. I mean, around, and although my question specifies about 30s to 50s, but I think right now we are seeing a lot of misconception around masculinity or testosterone or muscle mass in men who are in their 20s or late 20s. So where exactly do most of the men, in your experience and observation, Mark, where exactly do most of the men get it completely wrong?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, For example, testosterone is talked about a lot because it's a major male hormone and you can measure it easily. Um, so you can measure it as a blood test, you can measure it in saliva. So there's a few different ways that you can measure it. And that's where I think people really rely on it. The problem with testosterone in general is there's multiple ways to look at it. So, you've got to understand that there is normal levels for health. And historically, if you went in and got a blood test on a yearly checkup, for example, the doctor's looking at, do you have abnormally low testosterone? So is there a disease of some sort that's not allowing you to produce effective levels of testosterone? If it's very low, then they'll probably recommend some type of prescription to increase your testosterone levels. That's from a health standpoint. Historically, when you think about testosterone from a male enhancement standpoint, for performance, think of sports, think of bodybuilding, think of muscle mass, think of that. People aren't looking at the lowest levels. They're trying to see what is the maximum level I can potentially do to get the most benefit from muscle mass, size, possibly recovery, feeling better, libido, all those type of things. So people have really experimented over many, many decades with what are upper limits and upper dosages that people can do. And as we all know, once you start playing with hormones, there's risks. There's
Yeah.
very significant risk if you go too high a level. So over the last 60 or 70 years, realistically in the 60s is really when testosterone um, injections or exogenous testosterone is what it's called when it comes from the outside, was started to dabble in. And it started a lot in for disease. That was when it was really invented for, but very quite quickly, the bodybuilding community really embraced it for increasing muscle mass and size and things like that. But they also were doing that with a lot of other things, growth hormone supplementation, a lot of different steroids in addition to just regular testosterone. And there was a lot of trial and error, guinea pigging on themselves. And most of those individuals, had all sorts of health conditions, heart attacks at a very early age, things like that. They also lived a lifestyle that was quite extreme from a standpoint of other recreational drugs, potentially. There was a lot of heavy weightlifting, excessive weightlifting, which can put strain on the body as well. So it was really hard in those environments in the 60s, 70s, and even 80s to really get good data on what was the impact of testosterone by itself, because it was never really by itself. It was always stacked with other things, a lifestyle that was not typical. Many of these people did, like I said, recreational drugs and excessive training. So and they ate unusual diets, very high protein diets, typically very low carbohydrate diets, many of them. So it wasn't a normal representative sample that could be applied to a larger population group. Then in the 2000s, they started actually looking at testosterone replacement therapy as an anti-aging sort of health um, potential. And the
Yeah.
whole anti-aging industry became popular. In were getting older, saw that their testosterone levels were dropping. They were then prescribed low dose testosterone, which is really what TRT is now, testosterone replacement therapy. And that's become quite popular. Even with individuals in normal ranges, they're just trying to bump up to feel a little better, get a little more energy, recover a bit better from their workouts, and just have generally a better, feeling throughout the day. So that's typically the timeline of where testosterone has come from, where it's going. What's going on in the future is going to be these concepts of microdosing. And microdosing is already very popular in certain areas. And that's taking very small doses over shorter time periods. So instead of taking, say, an injection that people used to do, a couple times a week, now you may do microdosing of certain things every few hours. So that allows for the bloodstream to maintain a consistent level rather than having a high level when it's injected. And then over multiple days, that level starts to drop, and then you got to get another injection to bring it back up. So that's pretty much a quick primer on testosterone, where it's come from, and sort of where we're at the moment.
Oh, I mean, you just like um how well you summarized the trends, the fads, the events happened around this particular hormone and this whole idea about how it is kind of, so much equivalent to the masculinity definition. But then I also would like to ask you, Mark. I mean, I know it can be really very um, nuanced question, but since you have helped high performers stay at their peak, you discuss about male longevity and health span, and you work around vitality, clarity, energy, sex drive, strength. How exactly do you define masculinity?
It's a great question.
Yeah,
I mean, it really is, and I think it's in the eye of the beholder a lot, and
yeah.
cultural backgrounds and how people grew up. In certain environments, I think people initially go to the physical side, and they describe masculinity as in someone who's strong, has muscles, can, work all day in the field or in farms or in a factory or something like that. That was the traditional definition I would say most people would have agreed with in the 70s or 80s, is someone who was strong, virile, had muscle, could lift a lot of weight, could have good endurance, all of that. That to me was probably what the definition was. Now I think over time there's a nuanced definition now of someone who can provide for their family. I think that's an important one that to the definition, the ability to manage their feelings in the best way possible. To me, it's positivity a lot. You need to have a positive outlook to be successful. And I think that's where it starts getting into the mindset, the purpose, the other things that historically probably most people wouldn't have linked with masculinity. So it's a great question. I think, a historical definition is probably a little bit different. A lot of people utilize now. And I think that's a really, really great question. So I don't have, I would say, the black and white answer for it. And I've been to 30 plus countries. I've educated over 1 million people. And
Mhm.
I would say when you go to different countries and different cultures, the definition of masculinity is very different.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Mark. Couldn't agree. I mean, in cultures, in it is defined, in families to families, society to society, culture to culture. So then it's basically, I kind of it's very difficult to define in a black and white manner. You're absolutely right. But anyway, thank you so much for addressing that, Mark. Okay, now moving on. Mental resilience and emotional fitness, connecting to the last two important points that you mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, they often get sidelined in the male health conversation. And this is so relevant right now. We are seeing statistics supporting this observation. What's your take, Mark, on how mindset influences physical health span for men?
Yeah, mindset is arguably the most important. We know the physical requirements are there to live a long life. There's no doubt about that. But the mindset, in addition to the physical attributes, has to be there. Optimism is a huge piece of the pie. The people that live longer are more optimistic. The data is clear on that. So you want to make sure that you create this optimistic outlook on all situations, because we know there's a lot of tough situations people go through, but you have to maintain a optimistic outlook. You have to look at it from that lens. So that's really, really important. Resiliency is that sort of ability to handle tough environments. Some people will call it grit. There's quite a bit of research by Carol Dweck and others who have looked at this concept of grit, which is really a form of resiliency. It used to be called mental toughness. It's just the ability to handle tough situations and address them and reframe the discussion. One of my mentors, Billie Jean King, uses a phrase called pressure is a privilege. And when people feel stress or pressure, many times they don't understand that they're in a position where they have an opportunity to do something great or do something really good. And you have to reframe the environment rather than feeling stress or pressure. You have to look at it as I have an opportunity to do something that hasn't been done yet or been done before, or I get the opportunity to be great. And that's the biggest difference between the highest achievers that I deal with and the ones that don't make it or are always struggling. So, from a mental resiliency standpoint, those characteristics and traits, and they're trained many times, uh, are obvious in every successful athlete and business person. And it's really, really clear that that needs to be part of an individual's makeup and they need to train that. If you don't know how to train that, work with a high level coach that understands that, has experience in that. But the biggest things is really reframing difficult situations into and what some people may consider stressful environments into pressure is a privilege. It's a privilege to be in those situations because you have a skill set that can help and improve that environment. Also, putting yourself and developing skills to handle those environments makes a huge difference. The military has a concept known as, you drop to the level of your training when it comes to performance. So the level that you train at needs to be at or above what you're potentially going to experience in your job, in your life, in your family. And obviously, we know we can't train for every environment, but we can train our skills to be able to adapt to every environment. And that's what I teach. That's how I work with the athletes and the executives is your makeup is your ability to learn and to improve your skills and to look always through an optimistic lens.
Hmm. Wow. That's quite a strong point and very profound perspective on this. And Mark, let me bring a bit of depth into this conversation. Now, since we are talking about health span, some would argue here that trying to extend health span, it kind of becomes another form of masculine pressure. Some men would say that I don't want to live longer. I just want to enjoy whatever years of my life I have. Just it's kind of, you're just giving me another way to be better, stronger, and faster. But I don't want to have that kind of pressure. So, how do we pursue longevity without falling into this perfectionism or burnout?
It's such an important question. And I see that every day right now. People now are obsessing and stressing about living longer. That should never be the intent. And just to clarify, people got to realize there's some terms out there that are being used. Longevity is really extending life. If your age, let's say it's 80 years old, if you can get to 90, you've increased your longevity. If 80 was your sort of, let's say, predetermined end of life date, and you got to 90, you increase longevity. You may not have increased your health span. Health span is how healthy are you in the years that you live. That's for a lot of people the more important metric because we would obviously like to live 10 years longer, but if we're unhealthy during those last 10 years and it's bedridden and it's lack of cognitive function and physical ability, is that really worth the life you want to lead? And that's where we focus very heavily on improving health span and on improving longevity. But you're 100% right that if it requires you to eat foods that you would never eat or avoid environments that you like to be in, and how strict are you going to be on that? That's where people have to make a personal choice. So I much prefer a term that I'm using and I've sort of created. I use the term durability, and it's really the ability to sustain high levels of physical, mental, emotional performance over time through stress, change, and aging while maintaining health, resilience, and purpose. Because to me, That's what life is. It's not about, can I eke out another year or two of very poor health just to live longer? It's really about, can we maximize every single day today? And can we make that life as purposeful, as productive, as healthy as we possibly can over the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 decades, whatever it is for people and however young they are now chronologically? What is their durability age? I call it a durability age. It's really that ability to maximize every single day right now and have that feeling for as long as possible into the future.
Basically, the context and the definition changes here. That's very
Correct. And it takes the pressure off people thinking this is all being done for in your 80s or 90s. Like everything you do today is to try to help what it feels like in late life. And that's a tough way to live. If you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, most people aren't going to make all these lifestyle changes, behavioral changes, diet changes, exercise changes in your 20s and 30s with the hope that it's going to impact you in your 90s. That's a long way to think. I much prefer to approach all these changes impact you today. It makes you more energetic. It makes you more engaged with others. It makes you enjoy life more. It allows you to potentially eat and drink different foods and enjoy them now because you're doing other things to maybe offset some of the negatives if you like, certain types of foods and drink. So it allows you to maximize your life today while also improving the likelihood of success when you do get into late life.
yeah. I think it's more. I'm not sure if I'm correct here, but most of, especially when we are young, we say that, let's do everything right now, because we never know when we'll die. So let's just live while it lasts. But I think here the context, completely changes. Let's live in the moment, but live well. We are not sure about the future, but then every day we have to live well in that moment, or the moments that we are living in. So I think the definition is kind of flipped. The perspective has been flipped now.
Yes, most definitely. It's there's no point doing everything that's uncomfortable, difficult, not enjoyable now with the hope that it's going to make you better in 40 or 50 years. That doesn't feel like a good way to live. I'd much rather people I deal with really embrace and enjoy every moment right now, understanding what the strengths are of what they're doing and how that's impacting them longer term. And if they do things that we know potentially aren't the best for their health long term, how can we offset that if that's really enjoyable for them? Let's say someone is a foodie and they like, you know, high fat foods, higher calorie foods that if they eat that all the time, they're going to put on excess weight. And we know all the negatives with obesity and things like that. So if they do like really, really good food and that's their enjoyment, that brings them great joy and that connects them with family and friends, then they have to up their exercise, obviously, to offset some of that. And then they have to make better choices at their other meals throughout the days and that they can then enjoy some of these, we call them fun for you foods or meals rather than healthy for you foods or meals. And you've got to reframe that entire environment so that people, like you said, can live as well now and enjoy life now as much as possible because nothing's guaranteed in the future. And you have to maximize where we're at today, not only for yourself, but for your friends and family who see you every day. Make their life as enjoyable and productive as possible so that you bring light into a much wider number of people than just yourself.
Absolutely. Responsibly and mindfully enjoying.
So true.
Great, great, Mark. So, let's give our listeners some great, takeaways or gifts from this conversation. So, if you could give men a simple blueprint, maybe one or two or three things they should start doing today, irrespective of their age, whichever they are in, to live younger and longer, what would that be?
Yeah, so the few takeaways that I recommend to everyone is try to get your exercise. 10,000 steps minimum per day makes a huge difference. Get them throughout the day. It doesn't all have to be at once. That is keeps your metabolism moving. It keeps your heart rate moving. It's really important. So exercise is one. Anything above that is great. Make sure you do resistance training at least 3 times a week. Muscle mass is huge for everyone. Doesn't matter age, doesn't matter gender. Make sure that you're doing resistance training. Those two things are sort of non-negotiable. Find the time to do those weekly. Increase your protein in your diet. Most men don't eat enough protein. It's really important to try to get anywhere between 0.8 and 1 gram per pound of body weight. So it's really, really important to try to get that, and most individuals don't. So increase your protein consumption. It makes a huge difference. And then focus on sleep. Make sure that we maximize our sleep time and our quality of sleep, which is hard to do. But if you can do those 4 things, that's going to have a direct impact on your purpose, because you're going to really create a routine and a lifestyle that helps you with your purpose. It's going to help you with your connections with your friends and family, because you're going to be healthier, you're going to be more enjoyable to be around, and it's going to correlate with living longer, stronger, and healthier.
That's really good. Those are some golden takeaways. And I'll make sure to mention them specifically in the show notes for our listeners. And Mark, if somebody would like to connect with you, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, so I'm on most of the social platforms: Instagram, Twitter, Kovacs PhD. You can go on there and find me. It's Kovacs PhD. Or if you want to go to my website to connect, it's mark-kovacs, Kovacs.com. markkovacs.com. So look forward to connecting and helping any way I can.
Great. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. And Mark, thank you so much for helping us understand, first of all, the difference between living long and living well, and also reminding us that longevity isn't just about biology, it's about intention. So, thank you so much for this golden conversation.
Thank you as well.
So, listeners, whether you are lifting weights or lifting emotional weight, the path to lasting vitality starts with asking better questions and showing up for the answers. And if this episode stirred something within you, share it with a friend or a colleague or your family members. Leave us a review, and don't forget, longevity isn't a solo sport, it is built in community. Until next time, stay bold, stay grounded, and stay human.